Hi, I'm Matt Pasca, poet, author, teacher. I've taught high school English. This is my 24th year. I teach all seniors and have for quite some time now. I grew up around a lot of poetry and didn't like it very much. I always associated it with a lot of melodrama and ego and a lot of work that I couldn't relate to. I think I was taught poetry badly, and the poets I was around were not poets that I wanted to be like. When I wrote as a young person, I mostly wrote journals, I wrote short stories, and for me, writing was a way to discover, and always has been a way to discover what it is I'm thinking. My perception tends to be intense and fragmented, and writing is a way that I can kind of spool together those fragments into some sort of whole that I understand better. But it wasn't until college that I rediscovered poetry in a different way. I had a professor at Cornell named Ken McLean who was incredibly inspiring and just a beautiful person. And he taught me poetry in a different way and taught me to find it in a different way in myself. And so I think after college, when I started teaching, I had filled up dozens and dozens of journals, and I decided to make sculptures out of them, because for me, that's what poems really are. They're more like sculpture than they are other forms of literary work. You start with a blank page, and every decision you make creates something new. And my fragmented, intense brain really attached itself to that. And so my first book, 1,000 Doors, is really, I guess, like an anthology of 15 years of writing that I managed to put together in 2011 when I was already about 13 years into my teaching career. My second book, Ravenwire, is more of a classic poetry book in that the work in it really only comes from about 2 years of writing, 3 years of writing, around kind of certain intense or consistent themes. And so I've been working over the last few years on a third manuscript called Traitor, which really speaks to all of the ways in which we are ascribed bits of identity that perhaps we didn't ask for, and how we can use those privileges, those unearned, unasked for parts of our identity to both challenge and undo those kinds of advantages so that we have true justice and true equality in the world. As for the poetry community, in 2011, when I was putting together 1,000 Doors, I reached out to George Wallace, who is in many ways kind of the Pied Piper of the Long Island community, or has been for many decades. And he invited me to the Conklin Barn up in Huntington, where they'd had an open mic on Fridays for about 25 years. And that's how I got involved with the poetry community. And having grown up on Long Island and having spent a childhood hoping I would never return to Long Island, it was amazing to find an artistic community that I could relate to and feel welcomed by, considering I grew up not thinking that kind of thing existed here in the suburbs, or the birth of the suburbs, really. So that community became a place where my wife, Tyrie and I, she's also a poet and author and performer, could kind of find a second home. And while we were building a family and really settling down here where we live in Bay Shore, we were able to meet lots of people who would wind up being our friends. And we started a workshop that we ran on Sundays called the Sunday Grind. We've started an open mic series that's been running for over 5 years. It's been on hiatus during the pandemic, but it's been a really meaningful and fulfilling endeavor. And we've had poets from New York City come, and New Jersey, so that the Long Island and New York City poetry communities can jive together. And we miss doing that very much. Even though I'm very proud of my two books, A Thousand Doors and Raven Wire, I'm going to read from the new manuscript today, just because I've read so much from these. And so this first piece is called Parent-Teacher Night, and there are bits of truth in it from experiences I've had as a teacher. But really, I wrote it because over the years, I've had so many Caucasians come up to me and say things to me that they figured, because I present as white, that they could get away with and that I would agree with. And I can share a whole series of those from over the years. So really thinking about language and how to some there's less you can say now, and to others there's a whole lot more you can say now, and how some people see us as moving in the wrong direction with language, and some people see us as being emancipated in our language. So this is called Parent-Teacher Night. You lean over the space between us and murmur through your mustache, "You can't say anything anymore." And because subtext is how I make a living, I know that you really just miss being hateful without consequence, and only said so to me because I look like you. And when I say no, more is being said now than ever, especially by those who've been silenced. And I use the words exciting and overdue. Your mouth becomes a music box cranking tinny notes to the "I'm not a racist" backpedal. Truth be told, I don't care about your kid's comma splices or dangling participles, her misplaced apostrophes or subject-verb disagreement. I care that she calls Hondurans Spanish, says Columbus, says forefathers, says dick flick, chick flick, friend zone, says mama's boy when a guy cares and bitch when a girl don't. Or hysterical. Did you know that word derives from the Latin hystericus, meaning of the womb, and was used to pathologize women's emotions? Am I saying too much? Am I causing hysteria? I don't care if your daughter overuses rhetorical questions. I care that as brown folks' bingo cards flood with trauma, she says ghetto, says race card, says get over it, says illegal, says speak English. I'm proving your point, aren't I? Saying what can't be said? Look, I can be a screen of green squiggles for anyone, but grammar isn't the check we need. Algebra not the only way to redefine terms. So miss me with your faux liberty, the kind crowded with sentences that end not in periods, but Black Death. All language is political. How correct it is a matter of who matters to you and who doesn't. It's my turn to lean over the space between us and ask, are you mourning the time you looked a woman in the eye and said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. I believe you"? Or when you grabbed your queer colleague's hand and said, "I spoke to the boss about his joke. It won't happen again." Or when you counted brown faces at a meeting and said, "Why is this room so white? We've got to do better." No? What exactly do you miss saying? Why so silent? Facts got your tongue? This next piece was inspired by a spoken word poem by Joshua Bennett, one of my favorite poets, called 16 Bars for Kendrick Lamar. And I had assigned it to my students, my poetry students at the high school where I teach. And I started writing my own version. And so this is really about the rapper Eminem, my son who has Asperger's syndrome, which Eminem also has. And it's also about combining spoken word with page poetry, which is also something I'm interested in, the versatility of language to be both rhythmic and interpersonal, and also something that can live on the page. So this is called 10 Bars for Eminem. 1. Your raps are vociferous, spit so splendiferous, carnivorous. This river is a Michigan matador's 8-mile cape of metaphors, raised to incite us to fight and invite us to light what inside us our fear makes us hide from. 2. My son's brain is speed gear, word bullet, tongue loose fire. When he first heard you, his rims found tires. 3. Irony this and irony that, damn the fools can't parse your act from your voice. See, I'm a teacher and preach, sir, that authors and speakers ain't the same. A narrator game ain't just self-reflection, slim and shady deflections, push satirical buttons, gluttons for any attention. 4. Thank you for going public about your Asperger's. It built highways for my son. 5. He spent 11 days on Guatemalan launches, volcano pyramid and Mayan jungle trails memorizing the fast part of Rap God. 6. To him you are. 7. Had you been my son, I'd have stayed and fielded the questions streaming through your mouth's transom like untranslated wind. Watched you tame leaves, the flight patterns of starlings, cling to wakefulness and syllables like one shipwrecked in oceans of infinite code. Watched the parabola of your senses leap from its axis, ascend towards anything cracked, open, and dripping why. 8. Marshall Mathers on the couch trying to matter with patter and ink not to sink into traumatic clatter or memories and tatters on the brink of gift shattered and battered, left exposed in a crime. No flattery to charge times battery, only rhyme. 9. Were your 11-year-old middle school gym class organs also jelly framed by steel and masculine clipboard psychosis? Can I offer you, even now, a rib cage of morning sun, a steamroll of ions at low tide, the god of this love pressing your knuckles to the shore? 10. When my son ciphers his way through absent increments of time, holds his little brother's hand, hugs the waiter who serves him pizza, and begins every day bright and clean and full of unironic hope, despite the snail-bashing world closing in. When my son really stands up, when he stands up, when he stands up, I thank you. I think one of the aspects of poetry that I'm most passionate about and that I talk with my students about is, and I'm not sure I put it this way, but we often talk about economically the haves and the have-nots, how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And I think with art and specifically poetry, where we're inside the point of view so often of a narrator or a speaker who takes us into a world we're not familiar with or that is new to us, I think in many ways a lot of the people who are already empathy rich just keep getting empathy richer. And a lot of people who are empathy poor, unfortunately, through cognitive dissonance or through misinformation, remain empathy poor. And one thing I try to do as a teacher and as a poet is to try and bridge that gap a little bit and help the empathy poor get a little richer, because those who are always trying to put themselves in others' shoes, I think always need a reminder, but often are doing that already.